Hey Sam, it's me, Dr. Daniel, and this is your comprehensive stool analysis and parasitology video interpretation. Now, on top of the parasitology and stool analysis that we're about to go through, there's a few other things that I'm going to be discussing just because I've been messaging back and forth with your mother. I know I had you complete an outcomes form, which is a clinical tool that has been validated to help me to understand if there's any neurological issues that correspond with some of the nutritional dysfunctions that you're obviously demonstrating. And then there's your blood chemistry that I don't have the final report, but there is some preliminary data that I'd like to just discuss. So there's quite a bit of things that I'm having you go through. Understand that we're still in the investigative process in terms of trying to figure out, what is happening with your body and what's going on. But I'm trying to do my part as far as just make sure that I give you the information that I can when I get it and as soon as I can get it to you. Now, the comprehensive stool analysis that we had you undergo evaluated your digestive system for multiple parts of digestion. So when we talk about our gastrointestinal tract, of course, being able to digest foods, proteins, muscle meats, carbs, fats, those types of things are very important. So we're going to look at that and we get to talk about it. Doing a general survey of what is considered to be keystone species of bacteria. There is not one test, at least clinically, academically, they can evaluate your microbiome and check for thousands of different organisms. But in the commercial space or consumer space, and in the clinical space, there is not one test that will screen you for every single organism that is in your body. So they instead do what's called a keystone species survey, which are the species that are absolutely necessary for human health, and that's what we get screened for. We also screened you for pathological bacteria, parasites, worms, amoebas of different types, and then several inflammatory compounds. Now, starting off with this first section here, you're looking at the bacteriology culture. You can see it's color-coded green, yellow, and then pinkish. You never want anything to show up over here. This would be pathological bacteria or pathogenic bacteria, dysbiotic bacteria, and of course you see nothing shows up there, so that's good. Commensal bacteria are considered neither good nor bad, depending on how many good bacteria you have or bad bacteria. You'll also notice there's numbers here. This indicates the order of magnitude of growth of the specific organism. For commensal bacteria, you basically want to see +1 or +2. You never want to see 3s and 4s, and so of course that's what we can see here. For the expected beneficial bacteria, these are your good bacteria, you basically want to see 3s and 4s across the board. You can see you've got 4s almost all the way through, with the exception of bifidobacterium. So if there's any probiotic that you need to be supporting your body with, it would be bifidobacterium. Now, I know that you're on, I'm going to say somewhat of an extreme diet compared to the normal diet of just having healthy amounts of plants and fruits and eating healthy meats. That's basically just a basic paleo diet. When we start to shift our macros where we're doing more fats or when we're doing more carnivore type diets, well, then we're going to create a change in our microbiome. I'm pretty sure you understand this, but the most diverse diets will always result in the most diverse microbiome, which definitely is a part of health. So given some of the dietary restrictions you've been taking, maybe that's why you've got no growth for bifidobacterium. But that said, I would still say this is actually a pretty good amount of healthy combinations of bacteria. The only deficiency, again, is bifidobacterium. I would suggest Megaspore probiotic, which would give you enough of the bifidobacterium to boost that. So the good news here, again, no signs of dysbiosis. It would be a mild dysbiosis because you have no growth for this one species, but healthy amounts of the other ones. No pathological bacteria. Commensal bacteria are looking good. There is a yeast culture that was screened where they did a culture. They also did a microscopic examination and a DNA analysis. The microscopic yeast exam showed rare amounts, and this basically goes from none to rare to moderate. And so you do have some rare amounts of candida that are showing up, so basically some fungal overgrowth. This, in my opinion, would not be contributing to any of the reflux or throat pain that you experience or that you're having. Although it can contribute, fungal overgrowth can contribute to a number of digestive issues, nutrient impairment, nutrient deficiencies. You could have energy imbalances, so fatigue and low energy, all could be related to fungal overgrowth. Again, this I wouldn't connect directly to the primary symptoms that you have, but definitely it's there, and there's certainly some things that we could look at doing if you want to work at reducing it. As far as the parasitology study, PX1, PX2, and PX3 stand for sample 1, 2, and 3. The number of, or the different types of organisms that you were screened for are here along the left-hand side. So you can see there's a number of protozoans, a number of nematodes, tapeworms, flukes that you were screened for. Nothing was detected, so your digestive system is looking really healthy here. Yeast did show up in 2 of the 3 samples, so again, that's a pretty significant finding in the sense that there is some fungal overgrowth. I'd be curious if you have any, do you have any athlete's feet? Do you get itchiness, anywhere in your body, underarms, back of your feet, crotch area, your head, your scalp? Is there, I guess, crusty skin anywhere in your body? Because those would be signs of where now the yeast is starting to cause some superficial issues, and that might be something. Now, if you don't have those, again, I would question whether or not we should go after that and treat it. So there are some additional markers, red blood cells, white blood cells that are screened for this from this particular study. Nothing showed up there, although you do have some blood that's showing up in your stool. We'll talk about that in a little bit. For the digestion absorption markers, you have a number of things that we looked at. Elastase is an indication of pancreatic function. Digestive enzymes greater than 200 is what we want you to be, and you're at 478. For the fat stain, no fat, undigested fats were passing through, no undigested muscle fibers were passing through, rare amounts of vegetable fibers were passing through, which could indicate that maybe you're eating in a hurry, maybe you're not chewing well, and or you lack digestive enzymes to be able to break these foods down. Stomach acid would be the most important one to address there. So this could indicate some stomach acid deficiencies, and again, I would want you to use digestive enzymes while we're still in the investigative process trying to figure out what's going on. As far as carbohydrates, it's negative, indicating that, just for general carbohydrates, starchy foods, there's no malabsorption or problems there. Next are the inflammation markers. Lactoferrin is normal, calprotectin is normal, lysozyme is normal. No white blood cells or mucus were passing through. Now, secretory IgA is a first-line molecule that is activated whenever our immune system is fighting something. You can see here that your secretory IgA is elevated almost by half, 275 being the higher limit, and you're at 487. So it's definitely a high marker suggesting that your immune system is being activated. In a little bit, I'm going to go through some slides that I use whenever I'm teaching at some of the functional medicine summits regarding digestion. It might be a little bit overkill, but I want you to understand some of the process of how we do these workups and how there is a methodology, right? There's a hierarchy in terms of moving forward. And where we're at right now is still the top to bottom, still focusing on your digestion from the mouth, from your enzymes going into the stomach. Now we're starting to see some immune dysfunctions here, and so we may want to dig deeper into looking at the immunological cascades that could be contributing to an elevated secretory IgA here. Short-chain fatty acids are very important for your microbiome. All the organisms in our gut rely on these short-chain fatty acids, and these short-chain fatty acids also play a big role in immune function, in our ability to heal, and in overall metabolism, and your short-chain fatty acids are normal. So here's acetate, propionate, butyrate, valerate, and butyrate. So the butyrate percentage versus total. And all of this is normal. It's looking good. So nothing to be said there. And then finally, your intestinal health markers. Red blood cells, none were passing through, but you do have some occult blood. Occult blood is usually, when we find this in the body, basically it's because of the presence of free hemoglobin. And this happens when red blood cells are lysed or broken, and then I'd almost think of it as kind of like dried up blood, or the contents of the blood that have spilled out, and that's what's being picked up upon. Now, basically, the difference between red blood cells and occult blood is that red blood cells you can see in your stool, occult blood you cannot, so it's more, microscopic. Things that could cause occult blood would be benign or malignant growths. But that's the least common, I would say, especially in your case, unless you're having a lot of mucus production, which there was no mucus that showed up. Hemorrhoids could certainly cause this, intestinal infections or immune dysfunctions that are causing inflammation, which obviously you have. Ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, these could also cause problems with occult blood showing up. Now, like I said, the first one could be scary. Certainly, cancer is something to think about, but I would not say that's the most common reason for this. A lot of times when somebody's consuming raw foods, raw fruits, raw vegetables, or a lot of red meat, you're going to find occult blood that can show up. So it's just important to consider that. Now, all that said, from this particular study, aside from immune dysregulation, I can definitely see that your immune system is being activated, but we have ruled out any kind of parasite, any kind of infection or dysfunction happening within the digestive system. We also determined that you've got a mild dysbiosis. Now, when I talk about top to bottom dysfunctions that can happen in the digestive system, there is a hierarchy that we can look at with all the things that can happen within our GI tract. Basically, it begins with the transit of ingested food. So basically from your mouth, right? And before even eating food, our brain plays a major role in digestion, because you think about food, that should signal the production of saliva. It should signal the production of digestive enzyme production. This has to do with something called the vagus nerve. So from your brain, the vagus nerve, and then the nerves that connect into your nervous system, which are known as the enteric nervous system. This is the top, right? So are there any brain dysfunctions, nerve dysfunctions that could be contributing to maldigestion, malabsorption of foods? That needs to be addressed. Hence the reason why I sent you the Brain and Health Nutrition survey, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Next is the food travels through our esophagus into the stomach, and this is where we have the breakdown of food particles. And a lot of this is still nerve related. This is autonomic function that you do not have control over, but it should be happening automatically. This happens in the intestine, our stomach, the gallbladder plays a major role. There's specific cells, parietal cells, pancreatic cells, liver cells, that all play a major role with the breakdown of food particles. This is why blood chemistry is very important. It helps me to begin the process of ruling all these things out, which is what we're doing. We also have to not only break down those food particles, but absorb those food particles as either micro or macronutrients. And basically, when we talk about proteins can create problems with the immune system. But when you break proteins down into their sub-molecules, so specifically amino acids or peptides, that no longer becomes offensive. And this is why an elemental diet is something to consider, because if there is something happening at the interface of your intestines that's causing an immune response, then it would be because of proteins, large proteins, versus an elemental diet where you're literally just consuming peptides and amino acids. So it's still nutrients, but it's already broken down. It's pre-digested. Now, problems that can happen with absorption would be the microvilli, literally the cells along your intestines. This is when we start to talk about leaky gut or intestinal permeability. And then mineral corticoids, which is basically stress, is your stress system impacting absorption of nutrients. And then vascularization, so there could be vascular problems. Next, beyond that, you'll have immune issues. So this is where we really dig deeper into leaky gut or intestinal permeability. Leaky gut is not enough. It's not enough to just know whether you have leaky gut or not. What you need to determine is whether or not we're dealing with something that's called paracellular or transcellular. And a lot of times you'll have people where they determine they have leaky gut, and it's like, oh, let's put you on all these vitamins to heal leaky gut. They don't get better because they don't determine the difference between paracellular and transcellular. So in order to do that, you have to do a specific intestinal permeability study to determine where you are, and that would dictate the type of treatment. And that's certainly a possibility, because from your stool test, your secretory IgA is elevated, suggesting immune dysfunction. Everything else is clear. So we can say that up until now, there are some signs of nutrient malabsorption, which again could be because of leaky gut. It's not because of a pathogen or an infection. The current blood chemistry study that I'm looking to see if there's any autoimmunity for parietal cells or pancreatic cells. which is showing to be negative as of right now. So where we are is really looking, maybe moving beyond into immune function, intestinal permeability, and then autoimmune panel. Next up, as these compounds pass through the immune system into our blood system, our body has to take some of these compounds and biotransform them into a way that we can eliminate them successfully. So this is where we get into phase 1 and phase 2 liver detoxification, which our microbiome plays a role there. And again, your microbiome is looking good. So that is what environmental and metabolite bioactivation and transformation is. And then you have systemic communication, basically things that pass through the intestinal wall. They make it through detoxification. If they're still causing issues, this is where something called LPS, lipopolysaccharide, which can cause inflammation. This is where you can start to get major breakdown in the body. This is really something where severe autoimmunity begins to happen, and you'll see severe immune dysregulation. Again, I just wanted to walk you through this pathway so you can understand the process, my thought process of where we're at. We've started at the top here, and we're kind of working our way down in terms of looking through things. Where, again, this is what I call my gastrointestinal clinical hierarchy. We can begin with digestion. This is where we still are. Move into healthy immune response to food proteins, and then overall microbiome health. So you have to be able to swallow your food well. There has to be good intestinal motility. You have normal bowel movements. You're producing saliva. You're producing stomach acid and enzymes and bile to digest and absorb those nutrients. The cells of your intestines are healthy enough to absorb those nutrients. We have proper electrolyte balance and hydration. That is all the first step of digestion. Then it moves into normal intestinal tight junctions. Again, do you have any transcellular or paracellular issues that could be contributing to your leaky gut? Is there overactivation of specific immune cells, our dendritic cells, our T regulatory cells, or Kupffer cells? Do you have normal SIGA, which you don't? So this is where we are now, and we're finding that you're having some dysfunction here, and this is why I'm saying we may want to proceed with an intestinal permeability test and or an autoimmune salivary test to determine if there's any specific damage throughout your body that maybe you don't have symptoms for, but there's an autoimmune condition that would be the reason why you have been unresponsive so far. So this again is just to give you a summary of where my thought process is. Now, I had you fill out this brain health and nutrition assessment form to give me some additional data. Basically, if you see more bubbles on the left-hand side, it's not a dysfunction. If you see more happening towards the right, it's a serious dysfunction, and in through the middle is moderate. The first section here that you filled out has to do with brain circulation. You can see here that doesn't seem to be a problem. This section, the second section here has to do with sugar metabolism. It looks like, again, you're more on the left-hand side, so no big deal there. This section here has to do with peripheral sugar utilization. Again, most of it is trending on the left-hand side, so no problems there. Section 4 has to do with stress in the brain. So now we're starting to see that, okay, stress or HPA dysfunction seems to be a moderate problem for you. So certainly we need to work on this. And I understand if you're not feeling well, it contributes to elevated levels of stress. But this is where I was trying to have the conversation with you of we need to try to slow things down and calm things down as much as possible, because just the sheer aspects of psychological stress can contribute to physiological dysfunctions or physical problems. Moving on, section 5 has to do with essential fatty acid absorption and malabsorption, and it looks like you're doing just fine there. Section 6 here has to do with the brain-gut axis. So is there any dysfunctions between the gut and the brain? It doesn't appear to be occurring. This right here has to do with the brain immune axis, so definitely immune stuff that's showing up. And like I said, that's where I'm at right now, is that's the next stage, is to begin digging deeper into your immune system. Section 8 has to do with gluten digestion. Doesn't seem to be an issue here, although I know you avoid gluten. Section 9, this here indicates intestinal barrier permeability. You obviously, are showing some positives here with yes, and then the 3. So this does suggest that there is some issues with intestinal permeability, and that would be something that we'd want to look into, especially considering the elevated secretory IgA from your stool panel. For section 10, we start to get into neurotransmitters. So this here you can see is more on the left-hand side. This is serotonin. Serotonin doesn't seem to be an issue for you. Section 11 here, if you look at it, this has to do with dopamine balance. So maybe a little bit of moderate dopamine imbalance based on your presentation, or at least reporting of your symptoms. Section 12 here is acetylcholine balance. And then out of all of the stress or out of the neurotransmitters, catecholamines, here section 13, you can see are more on the right side. This is stress. So again, we've got some stress issues, whether this is psychological stress or physical stress. Obviously, you've got some physical stress, but we just want to make sure that you are doing your part to try to focus on balancing your body, meditation, deep breathing exercises with intention. Doing things to try to calm and balance your body are super important if we're trying to heal or calm down our immune system and heal our body. Section 14 here would be GABA. GABA is a calming, and again, you can see here in the middle. So definitely showing some signs of neurotransmitter issues, stress, and intestinal permeability based on your self-report. The last section here is, again, I will do a full report once I get the final results, which I don't have, but I wanted to go over this with you because remember your cholesterol markers were elevated, and I know you were following a keto diet, which would be expected, but I was concerned because cholesterol by itself is not going to cause problems, but particles causes damage to our arteries, and something specifically known as LDLP. When you have elevated LDLP, it's pretty serious. So, I have patients that follow a paleo diet, patients that follow a keto diet or even carnivore that have elevated cholesterol, but their particles are low, meaning there's no damage that's occurring from that cholesterol. In your case, your LDLP is pretty high. 1,000 or less would be good. 1,000 to 1,300 is moderate. 1,300 to 1,500 would be borderline. And in fact, if somebody's on a keto type diet, high fat, high protein diet, my margin is going to be 1,500 or less. If you go above that, I start to get concerned, and you're very high at 2,800, suggesting that there could be some cardiovascular damage that is occurring based on these lipids. Again, I do not get concerned with cholesterol by itself, but when I start to see particles being elevated, that is a risk that you have to consider. I will, again, go through all of the information. I'll interpret this appropriately for you. The other thing that I wanted to share with you, though, from this study, just because we had concerns of this initially from the initial blood chemistry panel, it does appear that you, and this may be why you've been feeling worse. You have mono. Your Epstein-Barr virus, IgM, indicates an immediate reaction to Epstein-Barr virus. So this is suggesting that you've got it. And it's not, you can test to see, so EBV antibody IgG and the nuclear antigen IgG, when these are high, it would suggest a previous infection, but it's present in your body, nothing active. IgM indicates an active infection. So basically mono. And this could be a reason why you've been feeling low energy, why even mom says, you just look sick, because you are sick, because you have this viral infection. And mono, is definitely very common in teenage population. People get, thrown under the bus. They feel like they got the flu. They may not run the normal course of having a fever and all that, but this showed up to be positive. So I just wanted you to know that, and that gives rise to, of course, some of the feelings that you've had. On top of the cardiovascular risk of the elevated LDLP, your ApoB is also high at 167. It's very high. So again, this just kind of goes along with some of the risks that we may not be on the best diet. I know your mom's had indicated that you're kind of following something right now with a paleo keto type diet. Certainly if you want to continue following that, and then we'll reassess this, but there are certainly some things that I would suggest that we do to try to reduce the LDL particle numbers. And that has nothing to do with the LPR, silent reflux, or even potential esophagitis that you're having, eosinophilic esophagitis, but it's certainly something to consider for your future. Obviously, heart disease being one of the most common causes of death. There were some additional markers, antiparietal cell antibody. I wanted to see if you had an autoimmune issue with stomach acid production, which you don't. You're also negative for cytomegalovirus. And then again, there's some additional markers that I'm waiting on, but I just wanted to provide this to you because I know you're waiting for this information. So just tried to get this to you as soon as I could.